Anne Ridden, and today we're making a 3D
Oh,
train
friend's
cake.
cake.
I've shown this on the face before, and I've had lots and lots of
My
requests
new
for
friend's
me
house.
to help me please show us how to make the whole
Hmm.
train. So
Here it is.
Firstly, we're going to need to make the fondant details, and you can get the template for these and the recipe for the cake and all the fondant quantities and all those little details from the website. Video. Cut out the strips for the front and back of your train, and when I need bright coloured fondant like this, I buy it pre-coloured because otherwise you can tend to get pink instead of red if you're trying to mix it yourself. To make the little bumps at the front and the back, roll a thick snake of red, trim it to size, and then push it into shape by flattening each side and use a ruler to make sure it's straight, and then put it into place in the centre of the red strips. Then take the template for the side red strip and roll out some fondant fairly thickly for this because this strip sticks out from the side of the cake a little bit, and trim around the template and then flip it over and cut a second one. Next, roll out some blue fondant and cut out the shapes for the side of the cake, making sure that you have two of everything, and with the odd shape, make sure you flipped it over when you were cutting the second one so the shape is facing the right way on each side of the cake. Roll out some red and place the blue pieces on top. Then using a pizza cutter and a knife, cut around it, leaving an even border of red the whole way around each piece. You want these details to dry out, so they need to be made a few days ahead, but if you want to be organised, you can make them up to a month before you need to make the cake. Then to make the dome, roll a fat snake, and then using the template, trim it to size. If the knife has squashed it when you cut it, then just roll it a little bit more to round it out again. We're making it taller than it needs to be so that we can push it into the cake. For our wheels, roll out some blue fondant and cut out 6 circles in the size shown. Then cut out the centre using a smaller cutter. You can do this just using something round and cut around it with a knife, but you might find it easier to buy a circle cutter set. I'll link to the one that I used for this cake in the description below. Take a knife and trim off an edge of each of the inner circles. Then roll out some more fondant and cut out more circles. Then cut out some really thin strips of blue, trim them to length, and then place 2 across each other so that it splits the circle into quarters. And then put another 2 in each gap so that you have a total of 6 strips going across your circle. Then take a tiny circle cutter, I'm using the end of a piping tip, and trim out that centre circle where all the excess pieces have built up high. And then cut another circle of blue and place that in the centre of the wheel. Then I used a drinking straw to cut out a smaller circle and place that on top right in the centre. Take the ring that we cut out just a moment ago and place that over the spokes, and then the little semicircle just on one side of the wheel. And repeat that until you have 6 wheels. Roll out some yellow, and if your fondant is sticking to the rolling pin, you can add a little bit of spray oil and rub it onto your rolling pin and try again. Cut around the number 1 using the template, and you'll need one of those for each side of the cake. Then place them onto some red fondant and cut around them, leaving a little border of red. Find all of the parts of the template that say cut from black and cut those out. Roll a skinny snake of black and cut it to the length shown. Then roll a fat snake and cut it to the length for the funnel, and cut a strip of black and wrap it around one end using a tiny bit of water to make it stick, and then set that aside to dry. Place your black rectangles onto some yellow fondant and cut around them, and then leave them to dry too. Roll a thin snake of yellow and cut them to the same length, and then round the ends a little. These will go on the front of the train. Now to make our bumpers. Roll some red fondant out thickly, and using a straw, cut out some cylinders. Put a tiny bit of water on the red rectangle that we made earlier, and add a cylinder onto that, and then take one of your black circles and put that on top, and repeat that on the other piece. Again, using a tiny amount of water, add the number 1 to the sides of your train.
Number 1.
Then cut another 2 circles from black, place them on some yellow fondant, and cut around them using a knife or a circle cutter if you have one, so that you have a yellow border. I already have the detailed video showing the face, as I said, so I'll link to that one here. It's an older video, but it still explains it simply. If you follow the method for making it, you'll find it really quite easy to do. So now you have all of your fondant details made ahead, and you can just leave those uncovered to dry. Leave them for a few days, and they should be dried out after that, and then you can store them in an airtight container with baking paper underneath them until you're ready to use them. Now to assemble your cake. You will need frosting, a strong cake board, some cooled simple syrup, which is just half a cup of water, half a cup of sugar boiled until the sugar is dissolved, and your cakes. I'm using 2.5 quantities of the rich chocolate cake recipe, and the details for the cake and the frosting and the videos of how to make them all and tin sizes, all of that information is on the website howtocookbat.net. Place a small amount of your frosting on the board to stop the cake slipping when you move it, and then cut around your template and add the first layer of cake. Cover that in frosting, add the next layer, some simple syrup,
more peanut butter,
moist, and then more frosting. Continue to stack up the cake layers, and you can use offcuts from layers that you've already done to make one of your layers. And then look at the side of your cake and hold the side template up against it and check that you're up to the rounded top section. Fold your cutting template to the length from the back of the train to the end of the part that's sticking up, and cut more cake to this size and stack that on top. Put your template in front again and fold it to the width of the remaining section. Using offcuts, cut 2 more layers of cake and add them to the very top. You should now have what looks like a strange set of steps. Place your template against the side of the cake and using a sharp serrated knife cut around the template. If you don't trust your cutting ability to be able to cut straight, then you can print 2 of these templates and put one on either side of the cake to guide you when you're cutting it. To make the rounded part in the centre, cut out circles of cake and trim off one side so you just have a small semicircle. Sandwich those together with buttercream and add them to the middle of the cake. Then use your circle cutter to remove some. Cover the whole cake in frosting. Then look at it from the front and round off a little bit for the roof. You can do that before you add the frosting, I just forgot. Cover the circles of cake in frosting too, then clean up your work area and put the cake in the fridge for about an hour to let that frosting firm up. Roll out a long piece of black fondant and cut a strip. You can roll it up to make it easier to move, and then unroll it as you wrap it around the base of your cake. And repeat that with a strip of red. Now add some grey to the front of the cake and use a fondant smoother to push that into place. Next, roll out a large piece of blue fondant and drape it over the entire cake. And use your fingers to gently smooth it in around the shape of the cake, lifting and lowering it on the sides to smooth out any pleats. I often get asked in the comments if I make this cake for someone, how much should I charge them for it? And I suggest that you look up 3D cakes at your local stores to see how much people are charging in the area where you are, because it's very different in country to country. Where I live, detailed Thomas cakes in this size sell for just under $500. Use your fondant smoother to smooth out the sides, and then feel for where the top of the red fondant is, and then trim it off in a straight line along the edge. Next, make some thin snakes of red fondant. You can do that either by rolling them or by using a fondant extruder, and I'll link to where I got this one in the description below. Trim them to the right length and place them over the top of the rounded part of your train. Then add the blue dome. Taking something round, cut out a circle. I'm using the back of a piping tip here, and then push the dome in until it's just at the right height. Trim the very top of each wheel, and then add a little water to the side of your cake and put your wheels in place. Then add the red side piece over the top. Add the front piece to the front of the train, and the back to the other side. Measure the distance between the back of the train and the bumper and cut a strip of grey to go over the top of that area. Add a little water to the top of the red on the sides of the train and place another thin strip of grey over the top there. Next, add all of the side details that we made earlier. This is where making the details ahead makes getting the cake together a breeze when you're making it the day before the party. Roll out an extra strip of grey and add it over the front to make that area nice and smooth. Then add a strip of black, and the strange shaped black details that we made earlier should just go around that rounded smooth section at the front. Roll out some more black and cut a strip and wrap it around the circle of cake that we covered in frosting earlier, and then add your face to the front of that. Just leave that to side for one moment so that the fondant can stick to that buttercream really well. Cut a rectangle of black and place it across the top for the roof section, and then place a strip of black across the top of that back section. And then I've just cut little bits of black fondant to look like coal. You could put lollies in the back there or whatever you want in the back of your train. Finally, add the face to the front of the cake and cut out a circle from the top and poke in the funnel into the top. One question I get asked a lot is, what do you do with all of these cakes once they're finished? And if you keep watching, I'll show you where this one ended up. Others I either give away on Instagram, so make sure you're following how to put that into your friends. And others I just cut up and freeze for school lunches. This particular Thomas cake was a birthday present for one of my little boys' good friends. Back for more cakes, chocolate and desserts. There's a new video every Friday. Have a great week.
Great job. Stay tuned.